Blog Talk Radio. Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's Talk Consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Well, good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good today, thanks. And I want to thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Today on the Voice of Yoga, we will talk about the full moon on July 9th, 2017 at 6:59 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in Hampton, New Hampshire. Listen as we examine the chart of the event and point out some possibilities. The full moon is the delivery day of the previous new moon. We will be looking at the new moon on July 23rd, 2017 to find out some clues. Both charts have important positions in Cardinal Signs, which is the creating force of the universe. This may be a cosmic call to action. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join our Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance. Get the light in your soul and initiate your process. So, Swami, first of all, I wanted to talk about the July's full moon, and I received this information from Google search. And for many American Indian tribes, July's full moon is commonly known as the full buck moon because it's the time of year the buck deer start to grow their new antlers. This month's moon is also known as the thunder moon because of the large thunderhead clouds that form on the American plains in the summer months. So, Swami, let's talk about what's happening with this full moon, this July 2017. What's going on?
Well, typically what the full moon is the delivery day. So what the new moon promises, the full moon delivers. And what I really like using these small little cycles because it gives you clues as to what's happening on a larger scale with your life, like the direction that you're going in. And like I say, these planetary positions, they don't dictate anything. It's just the availability of a biosphere of energy that it's up to us to really give shape to that energy, to be able to harness it, bridle it, and use it, as opposed to being thrashed around or controlled by it.
Now, we said in the opening that we're going to talk about the previous new moon. So what is it that we should look from the previous new moon, and how do we make better use of our full moon period that's coming up?
Yeah, the new moon on June 23rd, that had Aquarius rising, and Neptune was in the first house, Uranus was in the second, Venus was in the third. Venus was in Taurus, which is a strong Venus. And, of course, Neptune in the first was in Pisces, which is a strong Pisces. And then the moon and the sun were conjunct in Cancer, 2 degrees 47 minutes. And you also had Mercury and Mars in Cancer. Now, Cancer is really the sign of nurturance. The sign is ruled by the moon, which is the feminine principle, which is mother. And so putting things into form and being able to protect and nurture that which we put into form is a major theme with this particular zodiacal sign. So again, now you come to the full moon. And this full moon is really a powerful moon in that not only do you have the opposition of the sun and the moon, but there's also other aspects that accompany it. There's a very wide grand cross between the moon conjunct Pluto and the sun conjunct Mars in opposition. But then there's a square to Uranus in the first house in Aries, and then a square to Jupiter in the sixth house in Libra. So you've got this cardinal cross, which, as we said in the opening, is a real call to action.
Mm-hmm. So I went on the website, www.ipdtransform.com, and I jumped on the CPS that you have posted there, and it seems like there's a lot going on Sunday. So we have that the moon opposes the sun, conjuncts Pluto, oppositions Mars, and squares Uranus. Certainly sounds like that's a lot that's going on. So when we're talking about the moon opposing the sun, what does that basically generally mean?
Well, any opposition can bring conflict. It's either a cooperate or separate type of an aspect. And so in this particular configuration, I really think there could be a conflict between staying what's safe, familiar, comfortable, and known, opting for what's comfortable, and being opposed by this urge to grow and move beyond what's safe, familiar, comfortable, and known. And so that type of conflict, to me, I look at those aspects as being really positive, because they really are a call to action. And typically it makes you want to do something. And especially with the moon conjunct Pluto and the sun conjunct Mars, because these are real power planets. And ideally, you want to create harmony and integrate all of these planets in your sense of self. So Pluto is really strong desire. It is the power of preservation and survival on the lowest octave, but on the highest octave, it is transformation. And Mars really is personal desire. And some of the things that we talk about in Kriya Yoga is that a lot of people try and downplay desire. And especially in a lot of religious communities and spiritual endeavors, people are trying to stop desire. And in this model, you really want to use your desire, but you have to recognize that it's not so much the desire as it is what we desire. And when you use a three-dimensional reality system like we do, when you use the Trinity, and you recognize that reality is multidimensional, and that there's a physical aspect, there's a astral mental aspect, and there's a causal spiritual aspect. And everything's going to be contingent upon what I desire. And like we always say, if you desire particles, you will be of a low animal nature. If you desire waves, you will be of an equally low human nature. But if you desire the void or the nothing, then you will be of a divine nature. And that, of course, is optimal. And this particular full moon really, I think, is a great opportunity to understand what we're talking about here.
Oh, interesting. So what can you tell us about the moon opposing Mars? You said Mars is a powerful planet. So what is it that we're going to look at should we look at with that?
Yeah, Mars is your personal desire. So basically what you really want to look at is, what is it that I desire? And then Mars being conjunct the Sun, which is the Sun is your incentive to express the self, which actually is your incentive to join with spirit, because that's really our true self. And so for a lot of us, there's always conflict between the material identity that we assume as opposed to our spiritual identity. And a big part of the practice of the Kriya Yoga that we teach is to be able to maintain harmony between personal interest and self-expression. So in other words, what you're trying to do is harmonize your personal desires with divine law seeking expression in your life. And in this particular full moon, you have this opposition from the moon conjunct Pluto, which is, to me, again, that is such a call to transform. Now, of course, it could deteriorate into something as ridiculous as an emotional eruption, as opposed to something that is more geared towards an epiphany of this whole thing of transcending one's identity, transcending personal desire, and aligning oneself with this part of ourselves that is eternal. That could be a real springboard for this type of an experience, especially when you have the square from Uranus in Aries, from the first house in this particular chart, and also the square to Jupiter in Libra. And that falls in the sixth house in this particular chart. And so one of the major themes of everything that we do in Kriya Yoga is your starting point is your primary relationship with your divinity. And that becomes your pivotal point. When your whole sense of self is totally established in the part of yourself that is eternal, that always was and always will be, now you're in bedrock. That anything that life presents to you now, you have tools, you have an ally, you have a relationship with something that's pure, powerful, and sacred. So on some deep level, you're never alone. You always have internal support. Now, it doesn't mean that everything's going to be a piece of cake, that sometimes we lose this connection, which oftentimes happens. It's kind of like when you're vacuuming and all of a sudden the plug is out of the wall. And if you are an experienced vacuumer, then when the plug comes out of the wall, you stop pushing the machine around and you go and you try and rectify the problem. Whereas when we find ourselves disconnected from spirit, oftentimes we keep pushing the vacuum around. And then we wonder why it isn't picking up. And then we respond, or we start to react emotionally, and the thing can really start to fall into a tailspin.
Now, I know I've asked you this question before. So how is it that we should be made aware? How do we consciously know if that plug comes out of the wall, that we don't have that internal support? What should be the big major clue for us if that happens?
Any form of discord in your life, any kind of problem that you're experiencing is an indicator that you're not in harmony with divine law seeking expression. So if you have symptoms in your body, those are indicators that there's conflict, that there's resistance, that there's this divine law, this force in the universe, this life force that is always moving lifeward, and growing, that it is being met with resistance. And so that's what we talked about in one of the earlier shows, that if you're not busy being born, you're busy dying. So we're either allied with something that is going to produce growth, or we are in some sort of regressive pattern. And so any kind of discord or conflict, confusion, things of that nature are indicators that the plug is out of the wall.
All right, we're going to pause right there to hear a word from our sponsors. So listeners, we'll be back with you in a few moments. Kriya Yoga Theory 1, Human Development and the 8 Essential Stages of Kriya Yoga. This program is a comprehensive course that will help you get your arms around the science of Kriya Yoga. It provides a clear understanding of the goals and objectives behind yoga, along with the physics of spirituality. It includes the practices, supportive concepts of Kriya Yoga, and the process in human development, apotheosis, the process of the human becoming divine. A complete guide on how to become a human in the adult state. Get the light in your soul and experience the simplicity and joy of union with the divine. This course is available in live classes at the ashram or online with 8 videos or 4 CDs. Visit our website, www.ipdtransform.com, for more information. And welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to the Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So, Swami, I think we have another transit to talk about regarding this full moon that's coming up. So what can you tell us about the moon squaring Uranus?
Yeah, Uranus is in Aries in the first house, and it squares the moon, which is in the 10th house. So that could bring a lot of really good new insights into you before the general public, your career, notoriety, fame. And it can also bring tension surrounding that, which could be a call to action. But Uranus on a lower octave is usually unexpected change. So just preparing yourself for the unexpected, I think, during a particular transit like this is helpful, but also looking for new insights.
Now, so I see that when I look at the CPS that you have actually written down there, and you write, tension from new insights may cause conflicts to transform self-expression from personal desires. So this is what you're talking about when you're mentioning new insights?
Yeah. That comes from Uranus, which is, our direct connection to the life force.
So earlier in the broadcast, we were talking about the Cardinal Cross. Can you kind of go over that again, exactly what the Cardinal Cross means? And I think you had said to me earlier that it's actually wider than normal. And so what does that mean?
Yeah, first of all, what you're talking about is that you have planets in the cardinal signs: Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. And the cardinal signs are the creative forces of the universe, basically, because when the sun goes into a cardinal sign is the beginning of a new season. So typically anything that is cardinal has kind of like the feeling of a new beginning. And so here in this particular configuration, you're going to have Uranus, which is in Aries. But that's like 28 degrees. And then, of course, the sun is in Cancer, but that's 17. So you're talking an 11-degree difference in between the sun and Uranus. Now, because it's the sun, that's not an extremely out of orb aspect. Mm-hmm. With regard to Mars is at 22, and Uranus is at 28. So that's 6 degrees. And that's an applying aspect. So that will bring tension, like we had said, between personal desires, self-expression, and new insights, or what can also be experienced as unexpected change.
So I think that wraps up the transits relating to the moon. Are there any other transits that are happening that day?
No, that doesn't wrap up anything, because you still have 2 other positions in the Grand Cross that we're talking about. So you have Jupiter in Libra, and that's what we were saying, that Libra is typically, that's the sign for relationships, and Jupiter it's your higher mind, so it would be your lofty aspirations. And what greater aspiration do we all have than, what we call your primary relationship with your divinity? That becomes the foundation of not only your sense of self, but it is your number one need. It is the most important thing that we have to sustain our lives. But most of us don't have that in a position of importance that it warrants in our value system. So having that in place, I think, is really helpful. If you are established in your number one need and anything else becomes smaller, then you have the ultimate coping skill. You can deal with real life circumstances and situations much more intelligently than you can if you are inundated with what we call unnecessary dependencies. If you are emotionally charged, anything can just about set you off, because if you don't get it, you respond as if you're in danger. You're like a minefield. Whereas if you have this lofty aspiration and you have a primary relationship with your divinity, and I'm not talking just intellectual, but I'm talking about feeling connected to the life force, then you have a handle, and you're able to use your mind now as your ally for creating your reality.
And that goes back to what you were saying before when I asked you the question, well, what is the big clue when we don't have this internal support? And so if you're saying that we could be an emotional minefield, that would be a big clue right there that we don't have internal support.
Exactly. I mean, that's one of the things that makes Kriya Yoga so different than therapy. See, in the therapeutic community, they have what they call emotional needs. And in this model, there's no such thing as an emotional need. That Kriya Yoga is a science. It's provable. And so what makes something a need in this model is that if you don't get it, you die. Now that's provable. Now, if you're responding as if you're in danger because you don't have what you think you need, that's an emotional need. There's really, it starts nowhere, it goes nowhere. You're a loose cannon. And everybody has their needs. So, whereas here, we all have the same requirements. We all have the same addictions. That we all have this hierarchy of needs that we are working with. But not everybody has awareness of that.
And so that's where the yoga practice comes into place, because that's what we try to do, is we try to be aware and be conscious of what is going on around us and within us. And that's a big difference.
Well, even within what you just said, there's a whole big movement now of mindfulness, that being mindful. And, in this model, it's not just being mindful, it is being mindful of the difference between a need and a want, that you have to have full attention to this concept of God. That if you have your number one need in its position of importance, and you are mindful of that, that's very different than just being mindful of your surroundings and just trying to get a better material experience in life. That if you have awareness and to have sensitivity for something that's invisible and intangible isn't an easy catch.
So what comes to my mind is when I hear about people or read about people, and they're looking for this one moment where they have that, they want this lightning bolt from the sky to come down and give them this spiritual awakening. And so what we are saying, I think, is that there is a practice and a procedure to be able to get to that part, to have that connection.
Exactly. And when the right symbol produces the right feeling, that should be the threshold of your epiphany. But if you have the wrong symbol and it's associated with the right feeling, then of course that's what we call in Kriya Yoga avidya, ignorance. That's what the Bible calls false gods. All of a sudden, the revelation that God loves me, how do I know? Well, it's giving me this very precious resource. And when all of a sudden that is internalized and you feel it in your body, then to me, that is your initiation. That is when your progressive cycle begins. And I think, the final aspect of this Grand Cross with the moon and conjuncting Pluto in Capricorn is, to me, is a real power play for us to actually see this transformation as a viable human enterprise.
And something that we can actually do ourselves. Like we can actually make that happen, actually get spirit into our body. And then if we do that, and like you say, using your word, the panel is wired. And then when that happens, isn't that when we have clarity of mind and we have perfect physical health? I mean, all these other things that happen if we can make that leap.
Yeah, exactly. And the main thing to understand is that in order to make this happen, you have to purify yourself physically and mentally. That is one of the prerequisites that not only is established in yoga in your second stage of yoga, niyama, and your first niyama purity, shaucha, but it was also why the baptism came before the Holy Communion. That this concept of purification isn't something that's unique to yoga. That early Christian mystics were doing the exact same thing. But you have to understand that there's the physics of spirituality, that like attracts like, and two things can't occupy the same space at the same time. But if you haven't purified yourself, the thing that we do encourage people to do is get this other branch in your other hand.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of great information today. Thank you for sharing all of that with us. So it is time to start closing down our program, so be sure to visit the website. Again, it's www.ipdtransform.com. Once you're there, you can check out all the goodies that Swami has on there for you. You can access all the archived Blog Talk radio shows and also some wonderful teaching tools he has for you there as well. So, Swami, do you have any other final words to give to our listeners before we end the program?
Well, I do hope that everybody had a happy full moon yesterday, and with that, I wish everybody a good day. Namaste.
Be sure to tune in next week to our program, The Voice of Yoga. We're going to talk about the 8th stage of Kriya Yoga, Samadhi. So until then, thank you for listening to our program. This is Lisa Winton along with Swami Jayananda signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.